My name is Paul Turner, Secondary Social Studies Coordinator for Kansas City Public Schools. Today I'm here to talk to you guys about thinking like a historian. This is going to cover from basically 9th through 12th social studies. So we just open it up thinking about this. You're a principal in a school and you walk into the cafeteria. You see a food fight going on. I'm going to show you a video. Then we're going to go from that video and talk about how this relates to being a historian.
Food fight!
Alright, so we saw this video. We saw food getting slung everywhere, right? It's all over the walls. You saw a kid on the table said, "Food fight!" So we know he's going to be the instigator, right? Everybody can say that. We have people, physical evidence to say that kid started this food fight. But what about everybody else in the cafeteria? As a principal, you can't just suspend everybody in the school, right? So everybody in that cafeteria probably participated in that food fight. So how do we get evidence to say that that kid participated in this? That's what being a historian is. We already know something happened in history. So we have the cause. Now we have to figure out the effects and how it relates over time. So thinking like a historian. You know what happened, so what? So what does that mean? So you're the principal. You know what happened, so what? So history is basically a relationship status. It's complicated. We know something happened. Did something happen at the beginning to cause that food fight? Or did something happen that just spontaneous interaction and combustible that made everybody start slinging peas and pears through the air? So let's look at this. The study of history is all about interpretation of evidence. So as a principal, you see this food fight. How do you interpret this evidence? Do you just take a pea off the wall and say, okay, this is physical evidence? Or do you have to go interview? Do you have to go talk to people about seeing what happened? So that's what we're going to talk about. Primary sources and secondary sources. So everybody in that cafeteria, we're going to call them a primary source. They were there when it happened. A secondary source, those are the kids in the hallway. They heard a food fight was going on. They went and looked, but they didn't see what happened. But they got word of mouth of what happened. So do you interview those people? So this is what we're talking about being a historian. How do you shift through this evidence? How do you see who's responsible for this food fight? So, habits of mind. Again, we're going to talk about the cause and effect. The compare and contrast. Okay, we knew it happened, so let's compare it to another situation and contrast it. How is it different from that situation? You're a principal, so you have to basically be this one that, that toes the line and basically maintains the discipline and order, right? Identifying themes and trends. We know this food fight happened. What were the common trends in it? Was this basically something that was brought in from the outside? Or did this happen inside the cafeteria? So we have to listen to everybody's story and see the trends. Tracing change over time. Okay, 2 weeks later, we knew this food fight happened. We're still doing a little investigation because we know some more kids were involved in this. Did anything happen over time to change the people's stories? So that's what we're doing. As historians, we're basically investigating a food fight on every piece of evidence that we have. So I always use this term called Persia. Basically, we're looking at political structures, economic structures, religious structures, social structures, intellectual structures, and art. This basically gives us a story of history. What political structures are in place, what economic structures are in place, what religious structures are in place, what social structures in place, intellectual structures, and art. So when we talk about political structures, we talk about government, we talk about laws, we talk about rulers, we talk about wars, why they happen. So when we talk about political structures, this is what we're talking about. All right, that's about part of being a historian. Economic structures. What systems of economy do we have? Are we a capitalist society? Are we a communist society? This is what we're looking at. How are we living as a society? How are we earning a living as a society? How natural resources are being used? So yes, being a historian, you have to look at all different aspects of social sciences. You look at the social, you look at the political, you look at the economic structures in place. Religious. Mankind's understanding of the physical and spiritual world. What kind of religion was being followed during this time period? That's part of that evidence is getting tossed against the wall, right? So when you think about the food fight, as we go back to that food fight, what evidence is being used in this evidence that we're using in this historical evidence as far as the food fight? Social structures. How people communicated and interact with each other. Were we basically interacting as basically a one unit society where everybody had different skills of labor? How are basically women treated in the society? How are class structures maintained in the society? So this is all the stuff that we looked at. Do we have first class citizens? We have second class citizens. All right? This is all part of that evidence that you get seen chucked around in the food fight. Intellectual. This is how we teach ourselves. This is basically the breakthroughs and understandings of the world. So that gives us the eye in Persia, right? The art. This is most looked over piece when we talk about history. The music. What kind of music are we listening to? What kind of dance are people dancing to? What kind of sculptures do we have? What kind of clothing are these people wearing? So that's what we talk about when we talk about Persia. This is the most overlooked piece when we talk about history. What can the art tell us about what was going on in this time frame? So, when we make a claim, I want you to think about this. When you make a claim, what's the evidence saying? So you're the principal. You bring these kids into your office. What claim are you making? All right? Basically, here's an example of a claim. The early Chumash were a very advanced society. What evidence do we have? Extensive trading contacts and advanced social structure. Here's another claim. Michael Jordan is the best basketball player in history. What evidence do we have? He has 6 championship rings and he had 2 three-peats. So, that's my claim and that's my evidence, right? So, this is what I want you guys to start doing. I want you to make your own claim for next week. Think about that. What evidence can you provide? So using a piece of historical evidence, we'll compare and contrast the careers of Michael Jordan versus LeBron. Alright? The reason I say Michael Jordan is the best basketball player in history, he has 6 championship rings. LeBron only has 3. So putting those two things together, compare and contrast, we know that they both worked hard and improved their games. But the 6 championship rings stick out because LeBron's 3 doesn't compare to Michael Jordan's career. We can argue about, this era might be better as basketball players. We might say that this era's basketball players are better than the ones from the 90s. We can say that. And you probably might be right. Because we might have to compare and contrast the eras, correct? So, this is what I want you to do. I use LeBron versus Michael. I want you to do this over the next week. I want you to find something that you're really passionate about. And I want you to basically create a claim and state the evidence that you have to support that claim. You might say LeBron's is the best basketball player of all time. He's better than Michael Jordan. So what evidence can you have to support that? So over the next week, get that together, and we'll talk about how this relates to history. I'm Paul Turner, Secondary Social Studies Coordinator. I'll see you guys next week.